So I think it's fair to say the folks at Bending Spoons and Evernote have had a pretty interesting 6 months, and I thought I'd grab an opportunity to ask them directly a few questions that I had on my list, but also a window into what's happening at Evernote and Bending Spoons to really evolve the future of note-taking applications. So today I'm very lucky to be getting to sit down with Federico at Bending Spoons, and he works on Evernote, so he's going to give us and unpack some of the questions that I had. Today's video is brought to you by Toolfinder. Toolfinder is something that we own that helps you to find tools. If you want to check it out, you can find it link in the description. We've got loads of lists that will help you to find the best productivity tools for you, and we're growing that daily. So check it out in the link in the description, and we've got a newsletter which rounds up some of those newer apps every 2 weeks. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Bending Spoons for actually giving the opportunity to answer some of these questions in much more of a clear way. Like, we've done some interviews with them in the past, but in terms of this being a different format, it's actually really helpful to get that insight. And especially for those users who are active Evernote users and want to be able to see what a window into what they're working on, their current struggles and future features are, this is actually a really interesting aspect. So we did this video asynchronously, so I will ask a question and then we'll get Federico to answer it. And naturally, hopefully it gives you a window into each of the questions. There'll be timestamps so you can skip ahead to each one. But let's dive into that first question. So the first question I asked was mainly about the pricing changes, team layoffs, and about whether Bending Spoons is resetting Evernote, and I wanted to give me a window into the major updates that have happened recently. So I'll pass over to Federico.
Okay, so resetting is a strong term. I would say that Evernote needs to become a sustainable company, and so we did some pretty significant changes. So the Evernote that we acquired wasn't, unfortunately, at that point, it wasn't that sustainable. And so what I can give you is some of the motivation for the majority of the big changes that we've made. And of course, these changes were hard to do. Some of them were hard technically, and some were just hard decisions to make. But we can go through each one, and I can give you some details. About pricing. So the first thing that people probably are interested about is knowing why we raise prices. What is the underlying reasons for raising prices? And this was made to better reflect all the new features that the team introduced in the past 7 years, because it's been 7 years since the last time Evernote raised prices, and also to generally align better with a broader market. This doesn't mean necessarily that inflation had a strong impact on this decision. It was partially one of the things, but that's not the reason here. It's also true that realistically, nobody would prefer to would be happier to pay more versus paying less, and we do recognize it. At the same time, I think that the feedback we received was pretty positive. All things considered, people on the whole are happy to pay for Evernote, and moreover, most Evernote customers are already experiencing pretty substantial improvements in the product quality, and I believe this is going to increase over time. So I think that in 6 months or a year, people are going to look back and see, okay, that was a pretty small increase actually in price compared to what we received in quality on the product. So that's why I'm optimistic about this one. The second one is about the second big change is about product. So I guess that you're gonna have a lot of questions about product also later, but some of the things we did were basically removing technical debt, cleaning up the code base, working to migrate and refactor some of the pieces of the software. And these are all pretty significant changes that help us future-proof the foundations of Evernote, so that we can build more stuff, we can build strong and fast in the future. And the third part is the team. So again, as I said in the beginning, the reason why we made these changes is for the long-term health of the company. and health is defined by a set of different metrics and things. And of course, the financial health also is extremely important. Evernote was not super healthy financially speaking, and that's the reason why we decided to restructure the team. Basically the reason is we wanted to move operations to Europe to maximize the efficiency of working on Evernote, and also to better take advantage of the synergies that there are with the Bending Spoons platform and team here in Europe. Many things like having more faster access to all the tools that Bending Spoons built in the past, working in the same time zone or in similar time zones, all sorts of little examples. So again, like, these decisions weren't easy, but they were necessary, and we want to make hard decisions when we strongly feel they are the right ones. So, like, to sum it up, forgive the simplification, but we can say that probably these were a few steps back to make like 100 steps forward in the future. And this is not something that is just a promise, like, oh, maybe in the future we're going to see some improvement. This is something that we already see in production, like in production, meaning like both in the product and for the general health of Evernote. Like a few months ago, if you asked me, the prospects of Evernote as a whole were pretty gloomy, but now I'm generally optimistic about the future and about the long term. For instance, you could take product, like people were complaining a lot about the performance, the synchronization issues, crashes, etc. Not that they aren't now, but the extent to which we are receiving these complaints is definitely different. And also, I'm starting to see some change in how the sentiment about Evernote is online, and also talking to people. When I started working on Evernote, I felt like people thought, okay, this is a product that is going down in whatever trend they were thinking about, maybe like popularity or functionality and stuff like that. Whereas now I hope that people are seeing the effort that we're putting in, and I think that we might be able to revert this trend, hopefully.
My second question was about how Evernote are stability-wise currently, and sort of addressing those stability concerns that some people have had, and I guess into the feature aspect of that. So this is a really interesting answer from Federico as he dives into some of the feature elements of that stability.
From the very beginning, when we started looking into the product and trying to understand what users thought of it, and also from testing it, we observed that the first thing we needed to tackle in Evernote was stability and speed. So recently we published a pretty long blog post that talks about many of the ways that we've been working on this. So if you want, I can, well, first of all, I recommend it for people who want to learn more about this, but also I will just summarize the three main points, which are not like inclusive of all things that the team is working on, but they are the three most important ones. So the first one is RTE and sync speed. RTE stands for real-time editing. It's this new feature that allows people to simultaneously edit notes together with other people, or at the same time in their own multiple devices. So when it comes to synchronization, the first thing we did was we released this RT, which was a feature that was being developed. And this was back in May when we released it. Our goal was to bring users this the fastest synchronization that they experienced on Evernote, and also to bring an end to same note conflicts. Why did we think we could end same note conflicts? Because the way RT is built is that it uses this new data structure, which is called CRDT, which allows us to sync the content of the notes instantly across all devices, while making sure that there are no conflicting issues on the notes themselves. And this wasn't possible with the previous note format. Now the rollout of RTE is complete, and we are very happy to hear that the majority of users has seen a huge improvement in the speed of node synchronization. And now we are focusing on ironing out the final wrinkles to ensure that everyone who used RT is having this improved experience. So this is basically what we did on RT, and I think that synchronization is much better than it was just at the beginning of the year, for instance. Then when it comes to navigation, so this is a different area of the product, right? So RT and sync, they are on the back end. This RT happens on the server, and whereas the navigation is something that we did on the client. So I'll give you an example of something that the client teams also worked on. So navigation is this system that allows that handles basically the way different views of the product interact with each other. So, for instance, different sections like the note view, the home page, etc. And this, especially on desktop, this took a few months, and it was a complete rewrite of the navigation system. And when I say desktop, I mean both the Windows and Mac clients, but also the web client. On mobile, it also required quite a heavy restructuring of the navigation system. And this was all deployed at the end of July and was all released publicly. So this is an example of a change that, differently from RT, is not immediately apparent to people. It might not even be apparent at all to end users because it's so hidden under the hood. But it is hugely important for the future of Evernote stability because of the way the components of the app relate to each other through the navigation itself. Now you might ask, why did you change this? Like the old system was working fine, and the truth is that the old navigation system had certain limitations that made changing or expanding the product, or even just working on the product, more difficult than it is now. So we took we decided to do a little work beforehand in order to be able to be faster in the future. And this new system gives us much more control over things that over the database, for instance, no? Meaning that development and changes can occur faster with less potential for errors, and with the just more updated navigation for both products, the desktop app and the mobile app. So the third part is the Monolith migration. The Monolith is this huge Java Enterprise Edition application that runs all the business logic of the product. It's a very big, old, and complex piece of software, and it does stuff like syncing nodes, storing nodes and other entities, and so it's pretty important, as you can tell. So before we started working on this migration of the monolith, the database of the monolith was running on the same machine as the application layer, which made the machines very heavy and difficult to work with. Plus the underlying infrastructure was accumulating a lot of technical debt. And so our approach has been to focus on cleaning up the code base and paying off this debt. And we are already making significant progress with the infrastructure. In fact, we recently rewrote basically the entire production infrastructure. And while we're rewriting it, we also separated the application from the database. So now the database is being migrated to a new and much more modern infrastructure, which improves security and reliability pretty heavily. So this new environment, this new production environment, is much more similar to the development one, which is the one that developers obviously use to work on the monolith. And so it's much easier for them to verify that the changes that they implement have the desired effect, for instance. And so for what does this mean for the end user? This means that this should mean that you find fewer issues, fewer errors on in production because we were able to develop the monolith in an environment that's much more similar to what you have on your machine and on the actual server that syncs the code that is on your machine. And so this is the third big effort. There are plenty others. For instance, we are also working on some speed improvements in the Evernote client, especially on web. I tried the demo of a version of the web client that improves loading speed by an order of magnitude, which was pretty nice to see, which is gonna be released hopefully before the end of the year, and all sorts of things. Like for instance, another example is task syncing. We want to make it more reliable. So I mean, you see how there is no single like silver bullet to address reliability and stability. It needs to be. This is the reality of what we have to work with. There are different issues that are separated from one another, and we need to tackle them all, or at least like try to prioritize them and assess which is the most important one, start from there, and also list the most important ones, and we need to work on them all. Now, this kind of infrastructural work also means that we are going to touch things that might be already stable, and maybe we mess up with those things slightly. And this has happened. We had an outage of a couple hours, for instance. This is, of course, something that nobody wants, neither us nor customers. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that there is no way of doing this work without some risk. And for now, we've always been able to put it back to a similar or better state than before. So I'm pretty confident that in the long run, this is going to be a pretty good improvement for the Evernote infrastructure and code base and product in general. So basically, sorry for the long answer, but to answer your question, this is what we've been doing multiple things at once on basically all sides of the product to make it more stable on the client, on the backend, on the synchronization between the two, on the way we store notes, and everything combined.
Now, one of the things that is quite a major element of the note-taking space is the evolution that's happening at the moment. So I asked what they do to plan to keep up with the current and more advanced state of note-taking applications at the moment.
Yeah, the note-taking / personal productivity category is an extremely competitive one. There are other great products that I used in the past, I use today, and that people I know use that address a lot of different use cases. Like I really enjoy seeing how different people like products that are more focused. So like they want one tool that does one thing specifically well, or people who just like having one tool that fits all their needs, and so there are different choices. And if you think about it, for many years, Evernote, like for instance, in 2010, 2015, Evernote was the undisputed cream of the crop. Like, if you ask people, there was nobody who didn't have Evernote installed on their phone in 2015. And this is exactly where we want to be and to go back. Now, how will we go back there? The product, first of all, needs to be absolutely reliable and super useful. And for now, our top priority is exactly that, reliability. We cannot keep up with any competitor if we're playing with one hand behind our back, which in this case is working with outdated technology at the core of the product. And so the first area where we want to focus is reliability. Then usefulness, right? So we want to look at how we can build very useful features that but that are very intentional and that are very focused. So we don't want to become a feature factory, and we don't want to become one of those products that just pushes out 1,000 features and hopes that one of them actually people find useful. We want to create innovative stuff that's also not available in the market. So if you could find a feature that we're working on in another product, why would you want to use Evernote, right? So we want to also be opinionated in how we build this product and try to make it very unique, always looking at what people actually want. So these are the two things. And then there is a third, smaller thing that people constantly talk about, and I do think they are right, which is the user interface, which is like a pretty cosmetic, aesthetic thing. But I think it's important. And so we will be working on changing the UI. Now, before viewers get scared, what I like saying to the team is that we are changing the UI, not the UX, meaning that all the muscle memory that people spent 10 years building, we don't want to mess with that. We want to make sure that people who have been using Evernote for years and know that the create button is in the top left, or this other button is in the other position. We want to make sure that we don't change things too much and don't mess with the flows that people created and that people built. But at the same time, I think there is pretty significant space for improvement, room for improvement for the interface. So we want to make sure that Evernote is a pleasure to interact with. So basically, to sum up, we will work on stability, reliability, on useful features, and on the user interface to make sure that Evernote goes back to the place I think it deserves.
So my final question was about how Evernote can compel users to go and pay twice or thrice the price of the competition for Evernote, and why they believe that Evernote will be the leader in note-taking applications and why you should choose that. I think giving them an opportunity to answer that can help really convey what their future messages are, for sure.
Yeah, so first of all, although there are many products in the note-taking space or category, it's a bit difficult to compare them directly to Evernote or to each other. Actually, many of these products have different features, different plugins, different plans for pricing. So I think that the direct comparison is not the most helpful one. The way I like to think about Evernote's value for money is to look at it independently. So I'm a customer, I receive some value from Evernote, I pay X. Do I think these two things are equal, or the value I get is higher than the price I pay for it? And so then every customer can decide for themselves if they find it worth their money. And this means that all we can do is creating a phenomenal product and trying to work super hard to create a phenomenal product, and then charge what we think is a reasonable price, and look for feedback and see if people are agreeing with us that the price is worth the product that we are creating. Now, some people understandably seem to judge the current subscription, the price of the current subscription based on the percentage increase compared to the previous subscription price. Again, I understand this, it's intuitive, but at the same time, I think this overlooks the fact that Evernote was priced far too low for years. It hadn't been adjusted in 7 years, and it was making it pretty hard for Evernote to progress. Evernote cannot be priced at the bottom of the market, but at the same time perform at the top of the market. Certainly not in the long run, if it wants to survive. And so, for example, for some people, an annual personal subscription costs the equivalent of a couple of coffees, it's $10.99 US dollars. Which, if they think it's too much for their use case, I totally respect it and we get it. And they have a lot of options that are available, including going to the free Evernote plan, which offers plenty of the same top tier features. But what's important to know is that there are an awful lot of people who find Evernote Personal pretty excellent value compared to their needs and to the price that they are charged. I can give you some examples. There are small business owners who, these are, by the way, these are people who I talk with and I have calls with, I interview or I read their emails. And there are small business owners who use Evernote as a database for their company's materials, for their documents, for their customers' files, like for instance, doctors, lawyers, with crucial information. There are researchers who store their life's work on the Evernote notebooks. There are entrepreneurs, students, there are writers who are writing their novels on Evernote. So this goes on, and there are parents also who like coordinate their family's logistics using Evernote notes and tasks and reminders. So now I don't want to just give you like some example. There is one guy who does this thing, so it means it's worth it. The way I like to look at it is by looking at the data. And we have a lot of positive feedback coming from the business data, which shows that the overwhelming majority of the Evernote users have decided to stay with Evernote in spite of the higher prices. And of course, the only reason can be that they think it's worth, Evernote is worth the higher prices. Now, of course, if you only look at the Reddit, the subreddit, you might have a different idea, but you have to keep in mind that people who are unhappy about something in a product, the first thing they tend to do is to go on Reddit and start an angry thread. So this can make it seem as though customers are unhappy, but that's actually completely unrepresentative compared to what I've seen in real life.
So that was a really interesting interview. I think we can gather a lot from that in terms of what they're doing at Bending Spoons. Evernote has had, I think Ian Small did a good job, in my opinion, in bringing back Evernote to core elements, but I think it just got to a point where it was probably too much in terms of its generalized vision. And I think what Bending Spoons have different to what the previous Evernote structure had was that they have a speciality and a specialism in what they do in terms of taking an app, reinventing it, and infusing it with artificial intelligence. So I definitely have a better feeling of Bending Spoons after watching this, of Evernote, and I think it could be quite interesting to see where the future heads with the application. I've always been quite interested in Bending Spoons because of what they've done in the past with applications, and that's why I continue to talk about why Evernote might not potentially be the note-taking application that people think it was in the past. Like, it was very hardcore productivity application, but I feel like now it's heading in a direction of more mainstream productivity application, one that I think a lot more people, once it's in its much more accessible format, I think it will have a much more generalized appeal to more people that are sort of onboarding with Evernote for the first time. So I do think that's going to be a bit of a bigger change in the future. So a big thank you to Bending Spoons, a big thank you to all for watching. I hopefully, as an Evernote user or somebody who is potentially looking at Evernote, you got more of an insight into the state of Evernote and what's happening. This video was brought to you by Toolfinder, so check out any tools that you're looking for, or if you're in the hunt for a tool and you want more context or research, you can find it there. And as I said, there's a newsletter that will be linked below as well. Thank you very much, folks, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future. Cheerio.